Welcome to the midweek market outlook. My name's David Jones, and if you're watching the recorded version of this, it was held on Wednesday the 20th of July at 12:30 in the afternoon. We're going to look at a range of markets, a few currency pairs, a couple of stock indices, and the price of gold and oil. I think it's been a bit of an odd week so far for some markets, but later on this week, on tomorrow, Thursday, we've got, I think the next major event for the week is the European Central Bank's interest rate decision. So we'll see what markets make of that. There's the risk warning on the screen, so you can read that at your leisure. Clearly nothing talked about today is a recommendation to buy or sell anything. It's just my opinion. We hold these every Wednesday lunchtime at 12:30. I've only started doing them the last couple of days in conjunction, last couple of weeks, sorry, in conjunction with ayondo, and if ever you miss them, there's always a recording you can watch afterwards, either on, I think ayondo put it on their YouTube channel, and I'll also put it on my website, which is tradeafter.com. But that's it for now. Let's have a look at the markets and see what's happening. I'm going to start with something we were talking about last week. I did trade this the beginning of last week. I talked about a little trade. I did a short-term trade in the Australian dollar, US dollar, and I think it's an interesting one because we've seen something of a resurgence, I think, in the dollar in the last couple of days against the likes of the pound, the euro, and the Aussie dollar as well. But for me, I still think, and the Australian dollar has also come under some pressure because I think that there's the minutes of the latest central bank meeting were released this week, and I think there are some expectations of a rate cut. But for me, even though it's come off over the last week, something like a couple of 100 points nearly from the highs, that trend in the Aussie dollar is still very much intact. So I'd still be quite tempted to look for buying opportunities, not today because it's still weak. It's made a new low for this down move you can see today, but I think maybe in the next couple of days, will we see maybe a bit of stability, and the level I'll be watching would be that one there, the dip on the way up, so around about the 7400 level. Let's flip over to an hourly chart just to see stuff in a bit more depth. Here we go, and if we zoom out, so you can see the sort of decline we've had, but we're back to these levels that were big levels. I think this is the post payroll low here. Let me put our horizontal line on there. There we go. And the low, I think, also the day before. So I think it's an interesting one down here, the Australian dollar, because the Australian dollar, US dollar, because that trend, the trend on the daily charts is definitely still up, and we're back to a level that has proved to be something of a turning point in the past, where the buyers had come in ahead of that sort of, in this example here, the 74.50, 74.60 low. So I think it's one definitely that I'll be keeping a close eye on in the days ahead to see if we do get a turnaround in the Aussie dollar in this sort of area here, and maybe, assuming this trend is going to continue, another run back up to the 7700 area. So I think it's an interesting one to watch. So that for me could well be a trade later this week. Other FX stuff is a little bit mixed up for me at the moment, to be honest. I think when I spoke last week, I said I'd had this euro trade on for ages, well, for a week anyway, and it had started moving. It did start moving. We were doing the webinar this time last week, so that would have been the 13th of July, so back here, and it was trading roughly around where I bought it the week before. Then on Thursday, last Thursday, we had that move, I think that surprise move from the Bank of England, where they didn't cut rates. I think something like 2/3 of the market was expecting them to cut rates. We didn't get the rate cut, so we did see a surge higher in the euro, so I managed to move my stop loss up to break even, and I thought, well, this is it, this is the start of a move in the euro, but bang, it just fell off into, I think that's Friday, and ended up getting stopped out at break even. So I had the trade for a week and ended up neither making nor losing. But I think it's an interesting one, again, the euro, because we're if we zoom back into of course the EU referendum move. So we had the move on the EU referendum down to just about 109, and we've seen a bounce back off that, and it's been pretty boring since then. Euro dollar has been stuck in this sort of fairly relatively narrow, I suppose, based on the volatility that went before it range. But we are pushing to the bottom of this range. So let's have a look at the hourlies, because I think again there could be maybe a shorter term opportunity. Now I'm a big fan of looking at how markets perform around about big levels. Let's just go into 4 hours, get a bit more data here. Here we go. So there's our Brexit sell-off. So we're already seeing a bit of strength coming in today, but for me, what I'll be looking for is how it performs. Oh, I've done the wrong sort of, I don't know the difference between vertical and horizontal. Here we go, horizontal line is what I want, bang, there. So this level here, sort of 109.70, was a level it did react off after the referendum result came in. So I think maybe there's a half decent chance for a euro rally from these levels back up to test those highs from earlier in the month, but I wouldn't be doing anything personally until this European Central Bank decision and press conference is out of the way tomorrow. So the decision is at 12:45 UK time, and then at 1:30 they normally have the press conference, and the press conference tends to be when the markets get a little bit lively, when they start saying what they may or may not be doing in the futures. But maybe, you know, euro dollar, chance of a bounce down here, but it's been something of a scrappy few weeks, I think, for that one. Now, pound against dollar, this is a trade I did yesterday. I got stopped out of it pretty quickly, this one, in the end. But pound against, my thinking behind it was, we look on the hourlies, and if we zoom back out, we had seen, you know, something of a good run, pound against the dollar, recently off the lows from earlier this month, 6th of July lows, around about 128. That's the spike higher on the interest rate decision from the Bank of England last Thursday when they didn't cut. It jumped something like a couple of 100 points. It did come back, but the next day it went back up to test those highs, and it was selling off. So this was earlier this week, and I thought I was looking at sort of this sort of area, the previous low. I think I put it on Twitter. The previous low ahead of the Bank of England decision. I was looking to see if that was going to hold. So I ended up buying early yesterday morning. I bought in. I think it was about 131.80 with a stop below here, stop below 131, looking for a big move back up. I mean, so I saw strength for maybe a couple of hours, but as the day went on, the pound sort of ground its way a bit lower. So I think it's, I'm maybe a bit surprised it's given up this old support. It has come back up above it this morning, so it has got, it's maybe again a little bit scrappy. You know, I still think that we could well see another push higher for the pound, but for me at the moment we've got, you know, this sort of newer trend is arguably, is it still in place, or is it actually getting threatened? It looks like maybe it's having a go at breaking out, so it's a little bit choppy, the pound, I think, for me at the moment. But let's see how it performs if it comes back and sort of retests this 130.80, 130.90 area. But for me, it's a bit of a wait and see at the moment. I think the euro dollar, we've got definite level of support. Aussie dollar, definite level of support. Pound, I don't know. Is it giving up? Is it starting to give up this recovery that we've had this month? You know, are we going to see a move back below 130, back to sort of 128, 129? We have to wait and see how the next couple of days pan out on this one. The other one we looked at last week, which I thought was an interesting one to watch from a sort of maybe a longer term trader's point of view, was dollar yen. Let's just bring that up. So the daily chart is what we were looking at last week, and really I think the setup from last week, it's still going on. I don't think we've had the signal yet, but what I was saying was we've seen this fantastic rally in dollar yen, and I think it was, we had the election in Japan the weekend prior to the one we've just had, and I think the coalition government won out in the upper house. So the feeling was they're going to carry on with their policy of trying to make the yen weaker. And of course, when we see dollar yen go up, it's the dollar strengthening and the yen weakening. But much of this year, you know, the trend for dollar yen has been down. So we've seen, you know, a market that has sort of slid fairly steadily. And I was saying, well, maybe, you know, maybe this move that we're seeing in dollar yen post that election result is just a move against that major trend, and maybe the trade is to sell it short. But since then, since last Wednesday, it's not got up at the same sort of rate it did earlier in the week, but it's a market that's still climbing higher. So for me, it's not a short trade yet. You know, for me, it's well, let's see how it performs when it gets to this sort of level. And the first level I'll be watching on dollar yen is that obvious high from back here, which is probably right on now. So let's say around about 107 on dollar yen, I think is the level to watch. So for me, if that rally in dollar yen is going to run out of steam, it should start running out of steam pretty quickly. But let's see what the next sort of day or so brings. And after that, we've got the level up here. What's that? The high is 107.15. So let's say the whole 107 to 107 sort of 20 area, I think, is a big one to watch on dollar yen. But for now, if you flip it over to the hourlies, you'll see, you know, it's a market that does continue to push higher. We had a little bit of a, I think, a bit of a move lower at the beginning of this week. So sorry, that was Friday night. Last Friday night when we had the start of that coup in Turkey. It's a bit of a move lower, but it is a market that's pushed higher. So for me, dollar yen is still, from a sort of going short point of view, is still a wait and see one, but that trend is still down. So my expectation would be for the market to give up, start running out of steam. Let's see what happens. It's certainly not doing that at the moment. Let's talk about some stock markets. So let's talk about, I think the DAX, the German market, has been an interesting one. Let's bring that up. So I did a trade in that yesterday that I came out of this morning, and maybe a little bit too early, but the sort of thing I was looking for. So this is the daily picture on the DAX. So there's the referendum sell-off, of course. It's pushed back up, but it hasn't taken out those sort of pre-referendum highs. But what I was looking at, you know, I'm a big fan of looking at big levels in the market, bit like that level we're looking at on Aussie dollar, the one on the euro, but previous support and resistance. And what I saw yesterday, which again was pretty obvious, if we draw a line in from here, on the way up, you know, we'd had this great rally on the way up, and the market had sold off sort of the 13th of July, dipped back to about 9,900 on the DAX, but then, you know, pushed higher. So for me, if you know, one thing to look at if I'm looking at trying to get a trade on, where to place a stop loss, if I'm looking to buy, then setting it below previous support is always a good place, I think, to put your stop loss, rather than just, you know, picking a random number out of the air. So we had this move yesterday. If we just zoom in a little bit, so I've still got that line there, and maybe the move yesterday. Hang on, because again, none of this stuff is rocket science. You know, it's just trying to look where in the past market sentiment has turned a bit. So we had the move yesterday. It was about 10 o'clock yesterday morning, between 9 and 10 yesterday. So the market started off by selling off heavily, but you can see over the space of 1, 2, 3 hours, the market slowed down, and we saw the buyers came back in. So for me, it's a reasonable place to say, well, maybe there's a trade here. So looking to buy in here, I think it was 99.60 was where I bought in the end, so I ended up buying around about here, but with a stop loss the other side of 9,900. So I had a sort of 60, 70 point stop loss, and looking for, you know, a reasonable size move, or a couple of 100 point move back up to this 10,150 area, back to the previous high. So really just looking for it. Okay, it's sold off. Is sentiment changing down here? I want to be a buyer. Put a stop loss here. Wait and see what happens. And we have seen the market move back up. I did end up getting stopped out. I trailed my stop up, so I got stopped out this morning for, I think, just over 100 points. So I could have squeezed out a bit more, but I was trailing my stop loss up behind there. So I think, you know, it's an interesting one, the DAX, because maybe the trade now, you can see over the last couple of hours, if you really wanted to do a trade on the DAX, now maybe the trade now is to go short, you know, because we had these highs from earlier in the week up here around about 10,160, 10,170 sort of area, and it's currently trading at 10,107. So maybe we're just seeing something of a sideways trend underway in the DAX. So maybe that would be one trade to consider now. But again, for me, if it comes back to these sort of levels, I'll be looking to be a buyer. So the DAX is, I think it's still positive, but it's maybe run out of a little bit of steam in the last couple of days. This isn't the case, of course, for the US markets. We're still seeing these markets powering higher. I think we saw yet again yesterday a record close in the Dow, so all-time highs again. I think, like I was saying last week, you know, I do find it difficult to buy into strength like this. I've got a couple of trades on long sort of US stocks that I've had for a couple of months, swing trades, but I've not really done anything on the Dow for a couple of weeks. And like I was saying last week, I think one of the ways maybe of trading a runaway market like this is to look at the previous low. You know, we've seen the market power higher yesterday, out again to these fresh all-time highs, and it looks like it's up again from the official close yesterday. It's currently trading about 50 points higher than the official close. But you'll see yesterday, during the trade yesterday, it made the low for the day pretty early on. This was the low about 2:30 UK time, just ahead of 18,500, and it ran up to 18,550. It came back to about 18,510-ish, and then bang, strength into the close. So for me, if it dropped back towards these sort of levels again today, ahead of those lows from yesterday, it looks like a buying opportunity. So I'm a big fan of looking at just these big levels in the market to see, well, okay, where does sentiment change? And the big one for the Dow, for me, it's only yesterday's low, but it's 18,500. So again, if we saw maybe a bit of a drift down to 18,530, 18,550, maybe it's a buying opportunity again, looking for the market to ramp its way higher. I mean, let's see the level that needs to be broken to maybe suggest this Dow trend is running out of steam. I think if we saw a move, you know, we've been a little bit consolidating for some of last week and support at 18,400. If we saw 18,400 break, maybe it would convince more people to be sellers. But for me, you know, clearly the line of least resistance for US stock markets at the moment is clearly up. So I'd want to be a buyer on any weakness. Let's look at a couple of commodities. I talked about these last week as things I was thinking about, but I hadn't done, but I have actually done them now. So the first one we'll look at is gold. So what I was looking at was, when we were looking at this earlier this week, last week, I was looking at gold and saying, well, you know, the trend for gold has been up. So we have had a market that has made, you know, higher highs, higher lows all this year anyway, and the latest leg of the trend started in early June of this year and looks something like that. So when we were looking at it last week, I think this sort of area, I was saying, well, you know, how's the market going to react when it drifts down to these sort of levels? Are we going to see this trend continue and the market hook higher? And we did see this, although looks like it has been negated, I think, so far today. But if we flip over, I ended up buying gold earlier this week at 13.25. If you flip over, we did see the market at the end of last week did stabilize. So I put an order in at 13.25 to buy, which is, so I'm currently about $6 offside. But my stop loss on this is the other side of that big support. So it's a chart, it's a trade based off the daily charts for me, this one. So looking for the bigger term, the bigger, longer term move. So I'm not too concerned yet by the fact the market has slipped a little bit lower. So for me, the big level to watch on gold is this one here, that low from the end of June. So 1306, so the 1300, 1306 area is one to watch. I think if it slips below here, it does start to look as maybe that little trend, excuse me, is running out of steam. But at the moment, we'll see what happens over the next couple of days. Will we see the price of gold start to recover? And the other thing I was talking about was oil. I said we'd seen last week, I've done 2 trades on oil since then, but we'd seen last week quite a sharp move on the Tuesday for the price of oil. Hang on, it seems to be struggling to load it here. Let's see what's happening. Let's close that down and load it again. It might be because the contract's just rolled over actually. Maybe we don't have the data yet. Let me have a quick look. Or maybe let's have a look at Brent oil. There we go. Let's see if that one can come up. Let's try that. There we go. Right. So what we were looking at last week on oil, that the price of oil had been in a fairly steady decline for a while. And I don't think we've got that much data here to show it. Oh, never mind. I'll talk through what we were looking at last week. So we've seen the price of oil in a decline coming off those $50 highs. But last week we saw it break through the high of the previous couple of days. So I think maybe in oil we're seeing, you know, something of a trend change. And I think last week when I was talking, the price of US crude oil was up around about $47 a barrel, 46.5, and I really wanted to buy it at 45. So I said I'd put an order in at 45 with a stop at 44. Lo and behold, Wednesday afternoon, the price did sell off by about $1.50. I think we had some oil data out that showed oil stocks were at their highest level for 2.5 years. So they thought that may well impact on the price of oil. So I did get filled on the way down. The price of oil did bounce back up. I trailed my stop up, ended up getting stopped out for a small profit. But it's come back again over the last week or so. And again, I think this $44 is a big level for US crude oil. So again, I've done the trade again with a similar stop loss, the other side of $44. So we'll see how that performs. But I think, so the interesting ones to watch, I think, from here, clearly stock markets are the same as last week. You know, stock markets, we're still in just strength, particularly for the US market. You know, and I think for me, it's still very much a buy the dips market for stock markets. The euro is interesting because it's back to levels that earlier, sort of this month, end of last month, we did see buyers come back in, you know, these sort of levels here. So around about sort of the 109, what's that, 109.70-ish levels. So it's quite interesting, but we do have that European Central Bank decision tomorrow at 12:45, so I'd maybe hold off and see what happens. Pound, I'm surprised that it's broken these support levels on the way back down, but let's see, maybe it calms itself down over the next couple of days and finds some direction again. And Aussie dollar, you know, they've all been a bit weak this week because we've seen a comeback by the US dollar, but Aussie dollar, I think, is interesting because we do still have that trend in place since the end of May. So at the moment, the sell-off we're seeing is technically just a bit of weakness, a pullback in that trend. So I'd expect the strength to come back in, and the big level I'm watching is 7,400. So that's it. I think that's the end of this week's Outlook. We'll do it all again next week. But if you have any questions, you can fire them in via the chat box. Otherwise, if I flip up my email address now, if you've got any questions, just drop me an email. Hang on, if I bring it up. There we go. So you can email me. It's david@tradeafter.com. You can follow me on Twitter. I do sort of tweet out charts and big levels that markets are getting near on Twitter. But I think there's plenty to watch, and maybe when the ECB is out the way tomorrow, we'll have a bit more of a better idea. One of the reasons, I think I may have explained before, that I'm working with Ayondo is I like what they're doing on social trading. So I think social trading, it's been around for a while, but it's never really been pushed that much in the UK. So I'm doing a few things with them on social trading. And if you go to my website, tradeafter.com, I've written some stuff on there, and there's a video you can watch that explains how it all works. But I think it's quite an interesting addition to normal trading, this idea of social trading. But for now, I think we'll wrap things up. So we'll do this all again next Wednesday lunchtime. I'll put the recording of this up on my website a bit later on today, and we'll see how these markets do over the next few days. But for now, thanks for coming along, and I hope your trading goes well over the next week.